Did you know in 2022 that 5 of the top 10 running backs drafted in ADP did not finish in the top 10 in points per game in PPR? That's right. Guys like CMC, Ekeler, Henry, and Barkley all finished in the top 10. Meanwhile, guys like Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Alvin Kamara, and DeAndre Swift all finished outside the top 10. On today's show, we're hoping to identify some of the guys that will hit, some of the guys that will miss, and some guys that should be drafted in the top 10 in ADP. Before we do, I want to make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. For today's show, the top 10 running backs in ADP, starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And to help us dissect the running back position in the current top 10 in ADP is our very own Matthew Stiles. You can follow him at Stiles08 on Twitter. What's going on, Matt?
Back from a stint on the COVID IL, so I'm good to go now. I told you what my issue at the house was. I will address that once we're done with the call. We don't need to worry the viewers with that. So I'm ready to go. I did not know by percentage that we were at 50% for running backs, but when you read the names, it makes sense. It's almost more than obvious.
Now, question: we did a show the other day. 80% of the wide receivers drafted in the top 10 ended up finishing in the top 10 in PPR and points per game last year. Does that give you any more? Does it make you want to lean more towards receiver early for that safety, or are you still swinging for the fences at running back because they do give you the best positional advantage?
Well, the big league, the one that we always cover on Sundays, Derrick and I, we split that team, and we have for many, many years. We drafted Justin Jefferson 1.02. We are usually a running back late, not necessarily zero running back, but in the third or fourth round is when we grab the first one. But we love to load up on top flight receivers first. So hopefully none of our league mates are listening into this. But yes, we are a wide receiver first draft strategy, and that hasn't changed in many years. And in fact, when we get to our list in a little bit, I'll tell you the guy that we absolutely coveted the last 2 seasons, which I don't think we're going to even be able to sniff this year.
I am actually the opposite end. I usually draft heavy running back early. And to be honest with you, last year, one of the guys I was really high on was James Conner. And honestly, down the stretch, he was amazing. Like, he was so good. I got him in almost every league in like the third round. But then I realized that, my second round running backs, guys like Leonard Fournette, did not pan out. And it's like, I realized then, I was like, I got to start diversifying a little bit. So I'm excited to talk about these top 10 running backs today. On today's show, we're talking about ADP, guys that are currently getting drafted in fantasy leagues, best balls. We use best ball 10s, NFC ADP, and underdog ADP combined into one. And here's the list of the top 10 running backs. In today's show, we're going to talk about buy sleepers, breakouts, and busts. And by breakouts, we mean guys we're buying. Busts, we mean guys we're selling. Guys we think will fall outside the top 10. And a couple sleepers, guys going outside the top 10 right now that should be going in the top 10 in ADP. First off, let's start at the top. It's Christian McCaffrey is the first running back off the board. I think that's kind of obvious. Him with Kyle Shanahan plus Christian McCaffrey equals fantasy gold. Austin Ekeler, last year's RB1, is now the number 2 in ADP. Bijan Robinson, surprisingly the number 3 running back off the board, the rookie, playing with the Atlanta Falcons. Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and Breece Hall rounds out our top 10. So let's start with the buys. Who is a player that of this group that you're buying, you're all in on for 2023?
I would love to be all in on him. I've got him in our 2 leagues 2 years in a row by waiting till the third round, and it's Nick Chubb. There's no way I'm sniffing him in the third round. He's just not gonna fall. I don't know why people slept on him for so long. All he does is carry the ball all the time. And if you look at statistics, I think I found something yesterday or today that career yards per carry, Nick Chubb is third all time. Third.
Makes sense.
And he continues to do it. The one problem I've seen with Nick Chubb is that there's times when they just don't give him the football. The Browns need to be going through Nick Chubb first. and realize that he's their best chance at winning, and they just need to pound and pound and pound. But he's the guy I love. I won't have any shares of him if he's being drafted running back 6 overall.
Yeah, last year
I'm probably going to wide receiver.
Yeah, currently today he's going pretty high. He's 20th overall, so that's like back end of the second round. So you might be able to go receiver in the first top 5 picks, then flip around and get Nick Chubb in the second round. A lot of wide receivers are going early, so you might be able to still get your guy and an elite receiver this offseason. Let's jump down to Derrick Henry, who's my buy. All right, I'm going to take you on a little journey with Derrick Henry. Some information that I found out that I like about him a lot. I think the biggest thing with Derrick Henry is he's starting to get a little older, a little longer in the tooth, 29 years old. But Derrick Henry is not normal, okay? Remember Adrian Peterson? We faded Adrian Peterson, I feel like, for a half decade because he was in his 30s, and the guy, all he did was produce. So I think Derrick Henry's a loophole. But here's a couple things I want to talk about Derrick Henry's 2022 season. His top 3 offensive linemen last year, rated in PFF, missed a combined 25 games. Ryan Tannehill missed 5 games. The number 1 receiver who they brought in to replace A.J. Brown was Treylon Burks. He missed 6 games, okay? They lost 10 games last year. That's the most the Titans have lost since Derrick Henry has been drafted to the team. He still finished as the RB4, okay? 19 PPR points per game. 1.4 more points per game than Barkley at 5, okay? So he's averaging a whole point more than the guy who finished right behind him, Saquon Barkley. He has 4.4 PPR points per game more than Tony Pollard, okay? Now remember, last year they finished 7-10, okay? In losses, he averaged 16.2 PPR points per game. That would have been RB8 last season. And in wins, he averaged 22.7 PPR points per game. That would have been RB1 last season. Vegas win totals have them at 7.5. That's right around where they were last year. And currently today he's going RB7. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, this guy, by the way, they retooled their offensive line. So the offensive line this offseason, what's new in 2023? Maybe there's something around him that could change. Well, they brought in some guys on the offensive line. Last year, they were ranked 12th in run blocking, according to PFF. They brought in Andre Dillard, former first-round pick. 2 years ago, had the PFF 69.6 grade. That would have been 38th amongst tackles last year. Better than any tackle that was on the roster last year, not named Taylor Lewan, who got hurt. Then they drafted a kid in the first round to play left guard. They also brought in one of the Brunskill from the 49ers, PFF's number 19 guard last year. So they made some moves. Now, they do have some guys leaving and coming in, so they're swapping out there. But it seems like the Titans always have a good run game there. The other big change is Tim Kelly. Tim Kelly is the new OC. Was the OC with Bill O'Brien, and also Mike Vrabel back in his days with Houston, but he's well known with him. Tight ends coach, now the OC. Well, here's some notable things about Tim Kelly. Carlos Hyde, his one season that he had over 1,000 yards, his OC in 2019 was Tim Kelly. He had a career-high 245 carries that season. David Johnson in 2020 had his highest yards per attempt of his career under Tim Kelly. Highest PFF run grade of his career under Tim Kelly. So I like that as well. His competition, they did draft a 3rd rounder in Tyjae Spears. His player comp is Myles Gaskin. I am not too concerned about all that. Let's jump down to some sells. I obviously love Derrick Henry, but let's talk about some sells. And I think it's going to be one sell. So why don't you start us off, Matt, with the sell for this segment?
Yeah, so other than you and I always agreeing on the fact that we will not draft Justin Fields, right? We still agree on that. We both want nothing to do with Breece Hall as the 10th running back off the board. Pretty horrific injury early in his rookie campaign. It's a long recovery process. The Jets, God knows what they're going to do. Right now, Aaron Rodgers is in town, already with a calf strain. Maybe he's planning to hit 64% of the snaps played. I no longer have to talk about him on this show. I'm not contractually obligated anymore since he doesn't play for Green Bay. But I will tell you, I'm a little bit scared of Breece Hall right now. Later, sure, take a flyer on him, but I'm not a fan of taking high-end running backs or running backs at the high end of the draft when they've got an injury concern coming in, right? You can't plan for injuries. We've talked about that on the show on Sundays. You can't. You have to play through them. You have to draft through them. But if you've got a guy that is not all the way back yet, it's probably best to push him down the board, at least past the top 10.
We did an extensive is probably the better word I'm looking for, excessive as well. But we did an analysis last year where we talked about injured players. Okay. We looked at the last 5-6 years of data. Looks like we went back to 2016 to look at players coming off major injuries. Injuries include ankle fractures, ACLs, Liz Frank injuries, Achilles. Okay. So we ran through it last year. We talked about this. I'm going to actually just, you know what? Because I can, I put the link to this article from last year in our bio. It's really important we talk about this because honestly, it's getting to a point where I don't think people realize that it is not good for you to start drafting players who are injured. All right. So, Matt, can you see the screen all right? Not too shabby. Okay. So why is this important? So I want to give a shout out to fantasyinjuryteam.com. They did a great job putting all this together. What I did is I looked at this whole entire list of players who got hurt and how they performed the year afterwards versus their ADP. Okay. In this analysis, 25 of the 35 in the sample saw a negative outcome when it comes to their positional ADP for first positional points per game finish. That means 71% of the people ended up not returning value. Okay. Now, here's a couple of more important things why we want to talk about Breece Hall, okay? Running backs seem to be the most impacted. 89%, almost 9 out of 10, every running back that got hurt did not return value at their ADP. On top of all that, to drill down further, okay? Anybody being drafted in the top 12, okay, in their position had a 92% miss rate. 92%. So running backs going in the top 12 at their position missed their ADP by, you guessed it, 92%. That right there was like an eye-opening thing for me. Last year, I faded every single injured player, and it worked. This season, so we did a list of this last year. 11 of the 13 players that we talked about in our analysis did not. They failed to make their ADP. The only two players that did not were Chris Godwin and DJ Chark. DJ Chark finished like overall like 120th. Okay. He wasn't even a real fantasy asset for the whole season. And so Chris Godwin was the only guy that really emerged. He did kill it towards the end of the season, but a lot of that came in the second half. Please fade. Not only does he have the ACL, but he had a meniscus injury that delayed his surgery to November 18th. He is a player to target in the second half of the season. Do not draft him on draft day in the top 10. Wait a few weeks. Let him get up to speed. And when his value is a little bit lower, you could probably grab him in the middle of the season because that team might be tired of his slow production. So take advantage of that. All right, Matt, let's talk about a sleeper, a player currently going outside the top 10 in positional ADP that you think should be going in the top 10.
I think easily you can remove Breece Hall. We just went through that. A quick snippet from me and deeper analysis from you. I'm not sure Josh Jacobs can do what he did again. The likelihood of him being the NFL leader in rushing again is probably slim to none. Jimmy G just reported in with some off-season foot surgery, I believe, foot or knee maybe. So the offense in Las Vegas is even more questionable than it was. We know what rookie running backs can and can't do. Bijan Robinson coming off the board at number 3. Somebody else can have him. I like the kid, but somebody else can have him. My guy is Aaron Jones. I think that with the not necessarily the rookie quarterback, Jordan Love's not a rookie, but he's a rookie starting quarterback now. I think that he's going to have to rely on the veterans, both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is the stud number 1 because the young receivers aren't necessarily proven yet. Christian Watson had a good season. Romeo Doubs showed some flashes. But Aaron Jones is a safety net. He's a safety blanket. He's a safety play. He has great hands. He can block, and he can run. So I think that Aaron Jones belongs in the top 10. And I would say this, don't publish this part of the program. I would like to get him everywhere.
This is live, so unfortunately.
Kind of like I've been finding Nick Chubb. Maybe Aaron Jones is the guy that slips after I go wide receiver. So
there you go. It's definitely a shot. Definitely got a shot. You definitely got a shot.
Yeah. And then I have another point. After you give us your sleeper, I have a question back to the Breece Hall, but we'll hit that if we have time at the end.
according to our ADP right now, he's going 46th overall. I mean, I think you could definitely get him in the 3rd round if you want him there. Let's strip down to my guy. It's Rhamondre Stevenson. Okay, so last year, we saw some splits with Damian Harris and without Damian Harris. Why is that important? Because Damian Harris is gone. Okay, they brought in James Robinson to replace Damian Harris, and Bill Belichick called James Robinson, my apologies. Bill Belichick calls him a depth signing. You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like they're probably going to lean on Rhamondre Stevenson. And I know everybody talks about this all the time with Patriots running backs, and you can't trust them and all this stuff, and I get that. But we kind of saw last year when Harris was out, they leaned on Stevenson, and it showed in his points per game. If you show the games with Damian Harris, he averaged 13.3 PPR points per game. Games without Damian Harris, 18.3 PPR points per game. That would have been RB5 last year. And he got huge workloads when Damian Harris did not play. They did not get another back involved. It was Stevenson. The other thing is Bill O'Brien's now the OC. And when you think Bill O'Brien, you don't think running games really. But if I looked at this, in the 7 seasons in Houston, his RB 17 game pace. So if you extrapolated their touches for 17 games, opportunities, where it's just targets and carries, 304. Okay. That's elite usage for these guys. He wanted guys like Arian Foster early on in his career, early on in his coaching tenure in Houston, had really big seasons before his injuries started catching up to him. They also had Lamar Miller for a couple seasons, getting around the 250 carry mark as well. So there's a lot there. The offensive line does have some continuity for the Patriots. They weren't great in run blocking last year, but returning 4 or 5 starters, and they brought in Riley Reif, who's a solid right tackle veteran. So I do like the continuity up front. But Rhamondre Stevenson, if they didn't do anything to replace Damian Harris, so I think there's a lot more to lean towards his top 5 production versus his split production with Damian Harris. Matt, I know you got a question. Why don't you ask the question before we close the show?
Well, and with the Patriots, are they a threat to throw the ball against you 40 times a game? They're not. It's Mac Jones. Let's get real. My question back to Breece Hall area is, what would you do, right? Let's say you go wide receiver, or you get wide receiver and somebody like Kelsey or Andrews, right? So you think you're pretty good. If you get a third player, you go wide receiver because it makes sense. In the 4th and 5th, would you double dip with Breece Hall and Javonte Williams, knowing that Javonte was back at training camp today? When would you take those guys? When can you not say no? There's the double negative. When can you not say no to those guys?
So I put together a top 100 flex players, and I have, when I was looking at it, I have Breece Hall slipping down into the 40s for flex players, but he's going behind guys that you could easily get. Like, for example, James Conner is a good one. I'd take James Conner over Breece Hall every time. The offensive scheme that's going to be going to Arizona, of course, is Nick Chubb, our boy. Nick Chubb, we're just talking about. His QB coach from last year is now Drew Petzing is now the OC for the Cardinals. So I do like that for James Conner, especially has no competition for touches. Javonte, I'm not touching. I'm not going to touch injured players. I just went through the analysis. Last year, this is one of the things. I didn't win any fantasy leagues last year. I had 5 leagues, right? But I was in the top 5 or 6 in points in every league. And one of the biggest things I did more than ever was I just never drafted a guy who's hurt, coming off an injury. And literally, our analysis shows that they don't return value at ADP. So what's the point? If I already know I have a 70+% chance, and last year was 11 out of 13, like, what's the point? So I'm going to fade them off. What about you? Same question. Breece Hall falls to that 4th round. Are you pulling the trigger?
I think I pull the trigger around 5 and 6. If they're both there in 5 and 6, now mind you, if I don't have the Aaron Jones, I don't have the Nick Chubb, I don't get one of those guys, and I'm loaded with pass catchers, I think that right before it turns into running back 0 territory, I would look at those names. I wouldn't love it. I just think that at that point you kind of have to do it, right? If you get your 3 pass catchers, you get you a quarterback. If you can get one of the top 5 or 6. And by the way, side note, Justin Herbert is slipping all the way to the 6th round, but don't tell anybody that that's currently happening in ADP. I think that you have to look at them. I'm more comfortable subscribing to your plan based on your analysis that 11 out of 13 didn't return value. And then, even if you go to the further end of your analysis, it's still 60, what did you say? No, 72%, right? That's the best number, and it's still a horrific number. So
if he falls outside the top 24, that's when you can start pulling the trigger. That's the easiest way to go about it, because that's where the benchmark was. Once you start drafting guys that are in the top 24 at the position, they are still not returning value, 70% of the time. But when you start getting later and later and later, then yes, it's easier for them. Breece Hall will be an RB2 next year, low end RB2. But the question comes, he'll probably be closer to an RB1 the second half of the year and closer to an RB3 in the beginning of the year, or a low end RB2. And when you net out that at the end of the year, he'll probably be like RB 12 to 15. He's not going to be RB 10. But I do feel like if I can get him right before the trade deadline, if I'm a team that is, got, playoff aspirations and I want to jolt in the second half, especially with Aaron Rodgers there, I do like it. But it's one of those things that I've learned over the years, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm not going to draft injured players, and it is what it is.
So rank these three: Breece Hall, Tyler Algier, and AJ Dillon. You can pick one of them.
That's Breece Hall, of course. It's not. I think like a better question is like Dameon Pierce and Isaiah Pacheco. Would you take one of those guys versus Breece Hall? And I think that's where I kind of start leaning still Hall, because I think Pacheco is a little risky. You got all this Clyde Edwards-Helaire talk, and they still got Jerick McKinnon. And Breece Hall does have a 3-down skill set, and he's an elite talent. But I guess the same question for you would be would you take Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins, who are coming second year out of their injury, versus Javonte Williams?
Hello? Are you serious?
Got to answer. You made me answer it. Javonte Williams, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins. Which one you got?
Of those three?
Yeah.
Probably Javonte, but it's going to have to be late.
Yeah.
Because Dobbins hasn't proven to be healthy. Cam Akers hasn't proven to be good outside of maybe a 2-game stretch. And so for me, it's got to be Javonte. But again, another horrific injury. I abstain, right? I do the same thing you do. I don't want any one of the three of them. I'm
going to take I would take Akers and Dobbins. I'm just not interested in Williams this year. And if he does drop to the 8th round, at that point, it's all upside, right? It's like, hey, if you already have your starting lineup drafted, then every other pick is just upside anyway. You're not going to lose your fantasy league because your 8th round pick or 9th round pick never gets healthy and they never play. Trust me, if you hit on 5 out of the 7 first picks, that 8th pick's not going to mean shit. So you'll be perfectly fine there as well. Matt, before we close the show, what do you got upcoming? Tell the people where they can find your content. What do you got upcoming at Razzball? Tell the people a little bit about the off-season write-ups.
Yeah, we're wrapping up a little bit of some quick hitter articles about where I thought the winners and losers are by division from the draft. That's not necessarily guys that were drafted, but the impact of guys that were drafted on their team. So I just did AFC South. I think I've got one more division in the AFC, and then I'll move back over. I'll move on to the NFC. But I'll write those usually on Mondays. They'll come out on Wednesdays. And again, quick hitter, probably a 3-minute read for anybody that's interested. They'll be out on the Razzball site, and then friends and family will go ahead and post them on Twitter as well.
Love it. All right. Appreciate it, man. Make sure you go follow Matt Stiles 08. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. You can follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. Make sure you also go subscribe to Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And make sure you jump over to Razzball.com and see all those great articles. We got plenty more off-season content coming here. Thank you once again for joining. We are out of here, folks.